Hey, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to teach you one critically important vestibular exercise that could help you with both strength and mobility in regard to your posterior chain, and it could help with any pain complaints that you have related to your posterior chain. Now, when people hear vestibular exercise, their mind usually goes to what they know, which is clinical environment stuff based around dizziness and vertigo. And what I want you to know is that training your vestibular system is important for everybody. It goes beyond just having dizziness issues or vertigo issues. If you're somebody that wants to move through the world efficiently, be strong, and live in a pain-free body, it is super important that you train your vestibular system to keep it healthy. Now today, our focus is going to be on the posterior chain. And I have selected a single exercise that, based on its neuro-anatomy, would be an excellent option for improving the health and function of the posterior chain. So as I mentioned, it could be good for improving strength and mobility on those muscles on the back of your body, but it also could be important for improving pain symptoms that you might be having on the back of the body. So when I say posterior chain, what I mean is the large group of muscles on your backside from head to toe. So pain complaints that we often hear about the posterior chain might be things like chronic hamstring issues or hamstring pulls, Achilles problems, chronically tight calves, low back pain, right? Those are the common things that we often hear about when it comes to some sort of dysfunction related to the posterior chain. Those muscles are the same muscles you train when you do, for instance, a deadlift, right? So just be thinking about the back of the body. Today I'm going to teach you a really cool vestibular exercise called the infinity walk. Now make sure that you watch the entire video, because at the end I will summarize how you can best leverage this exercise to get the best result for yourself, and I will talk a little bit about the neuroanatomy that suggests why this exact exercise and the exact stimulus that it provides might be exactly what you need to not only get stronger and more mobile, but also fix your pain issues related to the back of your body. Are you ready? Here we go. Before we get into the demonstration of the exercise, it's super important that you have an assessment on hand that you can use both before doing the drill and immediately after doing the drill to see how your body is responding. Now, the assessment that you use is goal dependent, and there's multiple different options here. So if your goal is, let's say, strength, remember how I said this exercise we're going to do is really good for the posterior chain. So think posterior chain strength. Exercises such as a deadlift or a squat, or just many of the traditional strength training types of exercises that we know, could really work well as a before and after assessment. And you would just be using strength as your indicator to understand if the drill was helping you or not. Now, if you want potentially better mobility, okay, then we have to test some movements and see if your mobility is improving. So again, thinking about the posterior chain, we want some sort of movement that will tell us something about the function of our extensor tone. And you can choose anything you'd like if you already have an idea, but I have some ideas for you as well. So first idea would be a full body extension. Right, just doing kind of a back bend. A lot of times people are working on exercises that require back bending, so perhaps that would be a good option for you. And you're going to do it a few times and then just take a qualitative assessment of how does it feel and how far are you going. Another option might be some kind of hip extension mobility assessment. So for example, getting into a half kneeling position and then just kind of getting a sense by moving forward and moving into hip extension, how far can you go and what does it feel like qualitatively? That would be another good option. And then last, you could even use ankle dorsiflexion. Okay, so ankle dorsiflexion, and I'd want to keep my heel down, is also a good assessment for the posterior chain. I could do this in a half kneeling position, or some people like to put their toes like really close to a wall, place their hands on the wall, and then all you're doing is moving the knee forward as far as it will go without your heel coming off the ground. And you'll have a nice measure of ankle dorsiflexion, and the wall being there kind of helps you understand whether or not you've gone further, because visually you can see that gap closing between your knee and the wall. So those are 3 possibilities for a mobility assessment: full body extension, hip extension, or even ankle dorsiflexion. Now last, let's say you want to do this to potentially help with pain symptoms that are happening on the back of your body. The most important thing is that whatever movement you choose that might reproduce that discomfort, you want to make sure you're safe to do it. So if you're having some kind of acute issue and your body's under a lot of threat because of an injury or something, it may not be time to use pain as your assessment, because your issue might be sensitive. But if we're talking about more of a chronic issue and certain movements cause you discomfort, but you don't feel it's dangerous and it's not necessarily going to exacerbate your issue, then you're welcome to use any movement that you want to tell you something about the pain that you're feeling. Perhaps it's any of those 3 mobility assessments that I showed you, or it could be something like walking or going up the stairs, or just something in your life where you notice the discomfort or the pain. Use that thing as your before and after assessment so that you can understand whether or not the drill is helping you with that particular concern. All right, here we are, ready to set up the first variation. I have 2 that I'm going to show you of the infinity walk. Now, as far as equipment, you do need a few things here. You need something similar to cones. So in my case, I just found these 2 foam rollers. Okay, you could use 2 medicine balls. You could use 2 chairs. You could even use a pair of shoes. It doesn't really matter as long as you can put them on the ground in a somewhat wide open space. That's important because we need enough space to walk a figure 8. You'll see what I mean here in a moment. So when you set these up, ideally you're going to take your cones and you're going to place them at about wingspan, and you're just going to put them on the ground, and they're in line with one another. Okay, so whatever you choose to use. Now, you could make this course larger if you wanted, but usually wingspan is where I start people. Now, here's the idea. In a moment, when you try this, you're going to be walking the shape of a figure 8. Okay, so think about a figure 8 and its curved lines. And we're going to be using our cones to walk around, and we're going to be crossing in the middle as we do that. Sounds simple, right? Well, here's the catch, okay? Remember, this is a vestibular exercise. The number 1 rule is that you keep your eyes on a visual target the entire time while you're traveling that figure 8, which means that you're not allowed to look at your cones, okay? You may pick up on them with your peripheral vision, and that's good. That's actually a part of the drill. But your eyes are not allowed to come off of the visual target, which in this case, for demonstration purposes, my visual target is just going to be the camera, okay? You want to choose something that you have on a wall. It could be a mark on the wall. Maybe you take a little Post-it and you write a letter on the Post-it note, or just scribble a little black dot or something and stick it on the wall. That can be your visual target, and you want it to be roughly at eye level. So for me, it's going to be the camera. So here's how we set up this first version. I'm actually going to begin by standing between my cones, and my back is turned to you, my visual target, like this. Okay? Now to start, I'm going to rotate around until I've acquired my visual target. And remember what I said, my eyes are not allowed to come off of my visual target as I walk the shape of a figure 8. Okay? That's it. Now, Might look silly, might look easy, okay, but don't worry if this is easy to you because you're an athlete or something. There are ways to make this more challenging for you, for sure. But you might also be surprised how hard this could be. Oftentimes people will lose their visual target. So as they're walking around the cone, you'll see a lot of that happening. We don't want that, okay? We want you to know where you are in space without needing to take your vision off of the target. We want you to proprioceptively understand where these targets are, okay, so that you don't have to depend on your visual system to know that. And perhaps you pick them up in your peripheral vision, and that's okay as well. That's part of the training. So the goal is to create that figure 8 without taking your eyes off the target while walking with a very relaxed gait. Okay, you don't want to be rigid. You don't want to be stiff as you do this. We often see that as well. And here's another very important rule for both variations that I'm going to show you. There is no sidestepping allowed. So that means that when I'm coming around the target here, we don't want any sidestepping, okay? And as I'm coming through the middle, there's no sidestepping, okay? We want your hips pointed in the same direction that you're traveling the entire time. Make sense? Okay, so those are the most important rules. Eyes stay on the target, hips face the direction you're traveling, no side steps. Okay? Now, forwards can be rather simple and easy for certain people, but still that's okay even if you feel that way, because remember, it's the stimulus that we're after. It's the vestibular stimulus that we're after. So one idea to make this harder right away is to actually go backwards. So just like I can go forwards, I can also do the same drill backwards, and it is way more challenging to do that figure 8 to kind of keep track of where, you know, your cones are. Same rules apply, only now think about like your sacrum pointing in the same direction that you're traveling. Stay relaxed, breathe, trace a nice figure 8. You'll be surprised how challenging it can be to go backwards. People get really rigid and really tense, and you want to try to drop that tension and really relax as you do this, walking that pattern without taking your eyes off of your target. All right, so now we're going to move on to version number 2 of the Infinity Walk. And this particular version is more challenging than the first one that I showed you. All the same rules apply. Your eyes stay on your visual target the entire time. Your hips face the direction that you're traveling. And as you do that, your head ends up on a swivel as you keep your eyes on the target. Now, this variation, when you set it up, has one difference. Rather than facing away from the target like we did when we started version number 1, I actually want to face my visual target, which remember is the camera. Watch what happens. I begin to walk my figure 8, and if I don't want to break the rule, the number 1 rule of keeping my eyes on the target, if I keep going, I have to break that rule, right? Because I can't keep rotating and go around the cone, can I? So here's the difference. My eyes are on the target. I begin to travel. Eventually, when I've gone as far as I can, you can see how my body is rotated. Watch this. 1, 2, 3. I pivot, okay? Just like an athlete on the field or the court. I do this little 2 or 3 step pivot. I'm able to keep my eyes on my target, and now I'm back in line to walk this figure 8 and come through the middle. Same thing on this side. All right, so this one starts to feel really coordinated and fluid as you figure out that footwork. It actually feels it feels like an athletic type of drill. And you notice how my head is on a swivel. My body is rotating underneath my head as I walk the figure 8. Make sure there's no side steps, right? No side steps. No backward steps. We want this to be a pivot as we come around. Pivot. Okay, so similar but more challenging because of that pivoting. And yeah, just like we can go forwards, we can also go backwards. This is much more challenging, and I have to pivot to the inside in order to do that, okay? Pivot inside, and then find that center coming between the cones. So this is version number 2 of the infinity walk. Now, when you try this, expect some mistakes, right? Because it is harder to keep track of where your cones are. The pivoting requires some coordination, okay? So there's gonna be some lousy reps, and you're gonna have to just practice and get better at it. You might catch yourself taking your eyes off your target. That's very common, but the end goal should just be to make this really clean and to hold that gaze stabilization on your visual target as you move. We can go forwards, we can go backwards, and if you want to explore kind of the next level of this, you can even do it while running, and that can be a really strong vestibular stimulus by itself. All right, now that you've tried both iterations of the infinity walk, let's talk sets, reps, application. How can you leverage this exercise to help you? Well, number 1, did it help you? Because I don't want you to take my word for it. I chose an exercise based on the neuroanatomy that I know, but it doesn't mean that it's absolutely what you need, so you have to assess and reassess to understand your body's response. That was the point of the 3 different possibilities for assessment: strength, mobility, or even pain. So the idea here is to get your baseline assessment with one of those 3 things, or all of them if you want, and get that baseline, then start performing each iteration of the infinity walk, assessing immediately after you perform the drill to understand how your brain and nervous system is perceiving that drill and to see how your body is responding. You will get an immediate response, and oftentimes because this stimulus is a very novel one and a very strong one, and people haven't done anything like this before, they get some pretty amazing results. So assess, reassess, that's the most important thing. Go through version number 1, assess it traveling forwards, assess it traveling backwards. You can even take it to the next level and assess it running forwards and backwards. And you would do the same thing with version number 2, assessing each of the different possibilities, because what you might find is that one particular way of doing it, maybe it's version number 2, traveling backwards, is this high payoff drill for you, and it is helping you with either strength, mobility, or pain. So make sure that you have a good idea of where you are with your assessment process. That's the most important thing. From there, you can just use it depending on what your goal is. If your goal is strength, and you've located a high payoff variation, well, you're going to do that high payoff variation of the drill just before you perform your strength practice. So if you want to improve your deadlift, you do your infinities first, you do your deadlifts second, kind of like a potentiation drill where you're getting the benefit from the infinity walk and getting all that activation for the posterior chain, and then following up with your strength training. You would do the same thing with your mobility work. If you have a mobility practice and you're working on different drills, do your infinity work in combination with that just before those exercises that challenge your extensor mobility, okay? And if it's pain, same idea. Test your pain, do the drill, whichever iteration is helping you the most, retest to see how that has affected your pain levels, okay? That's how you're going to use this in the moment, and you can lean on that as much as you want. If you are doing this because of pain, you can perform infinity walks several times a day if it's helping you decrease pain. There's nothing wrong with that. If this is more about strength, you're probably just doing this within your workouts. And if you happen to get a good mobility result as well, perhaps you're doing it as part of your warm-up and maybe even your cool-down, not just kind of in the main body of your strength training. So lots of different ways to use this. I usually have people do 10 laps to start, right? Do 10 laps and assess, reassess, see how that is for you. Over time, as people get more advanced with this, I usually start programming it for time. So instead of saying, hey, do 10 reps, I might just say, hey, let's make it tough, let's run it. and let's do 30 seconds of infinity walk number 2, running backwards or running forwards. So as you get better, you can start to program for time. All right, I'm glad you stuck it out and watched the video all the way to the end. Let's get nerdy and talk about some neuroanatomy, because remember, this entire video was based around this idea of improving the health and function of the posterior chain of muscles. And there is a very specific reason why I showed you guys the infinity walk. So here's the basic explanation. When you perform the infinity walk, right, we have forwards movement and we have backwards movement, okay? And that's really an important part of this, because when we move forwards and backwards, we are exciting an area of the vestibular system that's located in the otolith organs called the utricle. The utricle is stimulated by that forward and backward movement. It's also stimulated by lateral movement, okay? And the infinity walk is a challenge, walking forwards and walking backwards. Now, the utricle sends a bunch of its information to the brainstem, and in the brainstem is a very specific nuclei, okay, the lateral vestibular nuclei. So that's an area of the brainstem located in the pons. If you're familiar with your divisions of the brainstem, midbrain, pons, medulla, okay? And they do different things, right? There's lots of different nuclei within the brainstem, and we can kind of look at those nuclei and see what it lives next to and understand a good rationale for why activating that nuclei might have different effects globally across the body. Now, the reason we're interested in this lateral vestibular nuclei is because when it is activated, it actually is speaking to the muscles of the posterior chain. So it's highly involved with creating appropriate muscle tone in your anti-gravity muscles. So the muscles that we use to hold ourselves up against gravity, the posterior chain, right? So it's hugely involved in posture, and it is involved in calibrating muscle tone from head to toe on the back of the body. That's why I kept saying posterior chain. So by performing the infinity walk and its different variations, we are actually activating the utricle in the inner ear, and it's sending information to that nuclei that I just discussed at the brainstem level, and it is affecting posterior muscle activation. That is the key takeaway, and that's why I love neuroanatomy, because when you look at pathways and you start to understand what structures live next to other structures, you can start to make really smart decisions about the type of exercise that you're practicing, and you can relate it to solving strength issues, mobility issues, pain issues based on what we know about that neuroanatomy. It is a blast, and it really, as a coach, it's a lot of fun because you can really fine-tune and target certain issues. And instead of trying to turn all the screws, you can be super specific and you can turn one. All right, there it is, the infinity walk, a critical vestibular drill for helping you to improve the health and function of your posterior chain related to strength, mobility, and even pain issues. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you really like these concepts using applied neurology to enhance both health and fitness, then make sure you check out the Cruise Elite podcast. You can find the link to the podcast in the description below this video. If you want to take it one step further, we actually have a membership platform that we call the Dojo, and inside the Dojo, we design your training programs, whether it's mobility or even strength. We incorporate all of this neuro stuff into the programs. So there's proprioceptive training in there, there's vision training in there, and there's vestibular training in there, and you never have to think about piecing it together because we do that for you. It is awesome. Within that platform, we also have a 12-week Neuro 101 course, which is designed to introduce you to this kind of material, and it's for helping you understand more neuroanatomy and its applications so that you can solve your own personal movement and pain issues. If you want to take it one step further, we also have a more advanced course called the Neuro Dojo, separate from the Dojo, and that's where we go super deep into applied neurology for improving both health and performance. That's it for today. Again, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you could do me a favor, give it the thumbs up, because every action that you take helps us reach more people and help more people like you. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the channel, and I will see you in the next video.